Division of Labor, and we are a longtime supporter of CCPA Nova Scotia, and I'm very pleased to be here with you all this morning. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement and an African descent acknowledgement statement. Our office is located in Halifax on the land of the Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands have been inhabited by the Indigenous people from the beginning, and we should each do what we can to acknowledge our presence on these territories. We each must also recognize our responsibility as settlers in meeting the recommendations and our inherent responsibilities on moving forward with truth and reconciliation. We also recognize that people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years, and we honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of African descent who came before us to this land. So thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here today. And we're very fortunate to have a provincial alternative budget. We know the importance of budgets, and budgets reflect our values. Nova Scotia has choices, and those choices determine who thrives and who struggles. I applaud the theme of this year, for the many, because that means investing in people and communities and not just markets that benefit the few. So, with that being said, I will hand it over to CCPA Nova Scotia's Provincial Director, Christine Saunier.
Thank you so much, Melissa. On a beautiful sunny day, Ruby has put the link to the alternative budget, which is now available on our website. Launched this morning, and I really appreciate everyone who has, oh my God, greetings from Pakistan. Goodness. In the chat, I see there. Who has lots of people have registered for a webinar on budgeting and the provincial budget, which I think is a win already. So good morning to everyone, if morning is applicable to all those who are joining. I am going to kick us off with just some reflections on the theme of this year's budget, and then I'm going to turn it over to some colleagues who have been on the working group. So today we launch the Nova Scotia Alternative Budget 2026. The theme of this year's budget is for the many. We are launching this alternative budget at a moment when something is becoming very clear. Our economy is increasingly organized for the benefit of the few, not the many. As billionaire wealth and corporate influence grow, too many people are feeling the opposite. Higher costs, stretched public services, less income, more food and housing insecurity. And that raises a basic question. Who is the economy actually for? And another really important question, what is the role of government? Budgets answer those questions. Budgets are not just accounting documents. They are statement of values. They show what we prioritize. They show who benefits. They show whether public money is working for people or not. Or sometimes they are obfuscated to not show exactly who benefits or not. And that's where we come in. You know, governments have at least two mandates, really critical ones, obviously growing the economy, and the other is supporting public services like healthcare, education, housing, and protecting the environment. Too often, those goals, growing the economy and doing all the other, are treated as if they're in conflict. We're told we must cut taxes, we have to privatize, we exploit resources to grow, even when those choices weaken communities and public services and harm the environment. The alternative budget, once again, challenges that idea. It puts people first. It demonstrates how Nova Scotia can tax and spend differently to lower everyday costs, to strengthen public services, to build an economy that works for workers, for families and communities. It centers what we call the caring economy. That means we recognize that care, housing, education, health, transit, income security, They're not side issues. They are the actual foundation of a functioning economy. A caring economy supports the many, not just the few who benefit most from expansion. It's really about building an economy where people can actually live with dignity, stability, and opportunity. It's not trickle down, because we know that doesn't work. The sponges at the top make that not possible. This is not austerity. This is people first public investment. The last budget that was tabled, so last, I think February, our government bragged that it had included the largest tax cut in Nova Scotia's history. Over $500 million would be put back in the pockets of Nova Scotians. They said families would save over $1,000 a year. Our analysis asked a simple question: which families? What we found is that the richest Nova Scotians benefited the most. We have a progressive tax system. Low-income earners received almost nothing from those income tax cuts in particular. On average, $6. Meanwhile, just in the first bit of the income tax changes and cuts, that cost 172 million just in the first year. And even for higher income tax earners, the tax cut for the top 20% of earners in our province, they got about $400. Now that's a lot more than six, but $400? Think about the loss of the revenue, the loss for public services. That was enormous. The dollars could have been used to reduce costs for everyone through housing, care, transit, and health. Instead, those tax cuts drained the system. The Nova Scotia Alternative Budget takes a different path. First, we improve tax fairness, so those with the greatest capacity contribute their fair share and others aren't unfairly stretched. And second, it uses that revenue to lower people's real costs and make life easier by investing in local development and public services. In fact, our budget has many, many dozens of ideas. I think Ruby's we're gonna show you some slides. We don't have a lot of PowerPoint, but we do have some. This is a very busy slide. We recommend that you do actually have a look at the alternative budget. We'll also have a social media graphics going around. Please share those around. This is a slide that shows some of the dozens of ideas in the alternative budget. So we use revenue to ensure that people can get access to childcare, to healthcare. We reduce poverty by 20% with our investments. We make post-secondary education more affordable. We support local farmers. We even invest in public grocery stores. We also, in particular, have spending around renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy cost relief, making energy more affordable for Nova Scotians. Ruby, that's that slide. We also know how important it is for Nova Scotians to be able to get where they need to go. And we invest in lowering transit fees, making more transit options available across the province, capping fares at $2, ensuring there's regular buses from towns to cities, ensuring there are new regular bus routes, setting up a public transit corporation for Nova Scotia. And this year we invest in, and you will hear more about this today, we invest in ending the housing crisis. Yes, we could end the housing crisis. We could have ended the housing crisis. We could have prevented the housing crisis because we've been calling for very similar actions for a very long time. And this year we have a comprehensive package in our chapter on housing. And we have Hannah Main here today who will be talking about that in a minute. And you'll be hearing about our investment in a new proposed Nova Scotia Public Insurance Corporation to help reduce insurance. That's housing insurance, car insurance, and pet insurance. And you'll be hearing more about why we've included that in this year's alternative budget. These are not just expenses on an accounting sheet. They're also not a household budget. They are social and economic infrastructure. That's what we've invested in. And what we show is that the economic multipliers for care, education, and health are far higher than any tax cuts. When people can afford to live, they spend locally. When services are strong, communities are stable. When childcare is funded, work is possible. That's how real growth happens. And here, I'm not going to overwhelm you with too many numbers, but I do want to underline that the good news is Nova Scotia can do this. We've looked at what's been happening and what is in front of you. I'm just going to show you 2 slides about Nova Scotia's fiscal reality. The first is we just pulled it out of the alternative budget to make you see what that trend line is telling you. And that is that debt charges as a percentage of GDP have declined quite significantly. Right? We are locked into what has been very low interest because a lot of our debt was renegotiated at a time when interest was much, much lower than what we've been paying previously. And when we look at the most important measure of understanding what is sustainable, the debt to GDP ratio in Nova Scotia, if you go back and look at what's been happening since the 90s, since the late 90s, we're in a very good position still to have some expansive investment. But we need to be clear about what kind of investment that we need. The problem isn't capacity, it's choice. For too long, we've paid to manage crises instead of solving them. Housing insecurity, health pressures, income instability, poverty, climate risk. The alternative budget invests way upstream in the conditions that make life affordable and communities strong. Our measures to increase income to those most in need reduce poverty by at least 20%. And yes, we do invest an additional 1.7 billion in spending. We also raise or reallocate another 700 million in revenue. And our estimate on the return of investments in what we propose is at least an additional $700 million in revenue. What the alternative budget shows is that Nova Scotia can grow by caring for people, by organizing our economy for the many, not the few. What we have in this package are costed proposals that we've been working on for many months with a really amazing alternative budget working group. And before I turn it over to Hannah, I want to thank first Kyle Buitt. Kyle has served as the co-coordinator of this year's budget. He took a small contract to help us coordinate the working group and support this project, and he has gone above and beyond. He was an incredible support writer, researcher, thinker on this budget, helping to convene the working group. But I can't thank you enough, Kyle, for what you've done this year with the alternative budget. I also, again, want to thank all of the members of the Nova Scotia Alternative Budget Working Group. I know some of you have been engaged in this work for many months, others more recently, but some of you for years, and some of you, I dare say, for more than a decade. I thank you for sharing your knowledge and really for engaging critically and respectfully in the discussions and debates that we've had over these many months. Through our Google Docs and all of that. There are 60 plus members of this alternative budget working group. You can see the list of names and organizations in the appendix of the alternative budget. And you have all really strengthened this budget. You make it possible for us to propose those dozens upon dozens of ideas that are now out there for the taking. I want to thank in particular also for research assistants, Ajia Deng and Una Johnstone Lorette. They helped on the housing section. And in fact, I do want to thank Catherine Leventon Reed for leading that housing subgroup with Hannah Main. It's a stellar group. Did a lot of work to come up with the costing and a full package on how to end the housing crisis. I want to thank my staff. So Ruby Harrington, who you see is doing the chat and sharing the slides. Ruby just came on board as our new communications and outreach officer. She did amazing work on layout and design and graphics and does our social media. So thank you, Ruby. And thanks to our researcher, Daniel Sardas Sandi, who is on the Zoom with us. He did research support for the alternative budget. He's a quantitative guru and I really appreciated his support. In fact, Danielle learned how to do the tax modeling for us, which is really exciting that we can really dig in. Look, government should do that for you, but they don't. So we will. And it really is important. Like, I can't say enough. The team that comes together to do this work, I so appreciate everything that's gone into it. And I'm going to stop speaking. And oh, Ruby has put up, yes. And to all of you who've come out, just a reminder that CCPA is funded by you, by Nova Scotians. So do support us in that way, but support us also by just following us, sharing our material, talking to your neighbors. This is how we get these ideas out there so that no government can say that they don't have choices because they have. Okay, Ruby, we can stop sharing there. I think Ruby did put in the newsletter link as well so that people can share, can sign up for that and stay up to date on our work. So I'm going to now actually call on Hannah Main to walk us through our main proposals on housing.
Hi, thanks so much, Christine. My name is Hannah Main. I am a sociologist and I'm a community legal worker at Dalhousie Legal Aid here in Halifax. I was able to dig out of the snow and drive here from the South Shore this morning, although it was dicey at times. Um, so first of all, thanks to everyone who worked on producing this alternative budget, especially the housing section, as you mentioned. Catherine Leviton Reed took the lead on a lot of this, and we're just very thankful. This report is so important because, as Christine was mentioning, we look at it and we see that it doesn't have to be this way, that the status quo is not the only option. And we know that the status quo is not working for most Nova Scotians right now, especially in terms of housing. And as a community legal worker at Dalhousie Legal Aid, I spend most of my days speaking with Nova Scotians who are dealing with the short end of the stick when it comes to housing. Families who are losing their housing because their fixed term lease is coming to an end, seniors who are in this cold snap and don't have adequate heating in their housing, students who are in apartments and are afraid to bring up repair issues for fear of reprisals from their landlords, people who are waiting on their housing subsidy application to be approved, and in the meantime are just having to choose between paying rent or getting groceries. Um, and as our research through that we've done recently through Dow Legal Aid also shows, is that these aren't just incidental anecdotes. Like these are systemic issues. Tenants across the province, especially, are reporting housing challenges. And all Nova Scotians deserve safe, adequate, affordable housing. And the proposals in the housing section of this budget speak to that. It's important to note too that the proposals they're not new ideas. In many cases, these are policies that have been successful elsewhere, that have been tried on a smaller scale here in Nova Scotia. In some cases, have been recommended by the government and just not followed through on. They're proven strategies to further the human right to housing. And the housing crisis is neither new nor unique to Nova Scotia. It's the solutions are out there. We just have to do them. So, and these strategies that are proposed in this budget include a ramp up of investment in construction and acquisition of affordable non-market housing. And when we say affordable, we mean affordable. People should not be spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. Um, while there has been some federal and provincial investments in affordable housing, it's not enough and it's not deeply affordable. In this budget, the alternative budget, we call for building 3,778 new non-market housing units each year for 10 years. And also acquiring 400 existing apartment units, to be converted into affordable housing options. And we're also looking for an increase in the housing subsidy and broader eligibility for the housing subsidy so that it can bridge the gap between income and housing costs for more people. And to be clear, housing subsidies are a short-term solution to keep people in their homes. And to be truly effective, they need to be combined with long-term, forward-thinking solutions like the other ones brought forward in this budget. So we also want to strengthen tenant protections, eliminating fixed term leases so that tenants do not have to fear eviction without cause. This proposal will cost the government $0, but it will make a big difference for the thousands of tenants in Nova Scotia who are on insecure fixed term leases currently. And then we also want to protect tenants from bad landlords by introducing a landlord licensing program and a compliance and enforcement unit to the residential tenancies program. We don't currently have a framework in Nova Scotia for holding landlords accountable for repeat violations of the Residential Tenancies Act, and we do not currently have provincial minimum standards on rental units. We want tenants to know that when they rent a unit, it will be safe, good condition, and their landlords will respect their rights. Other provinces and regions in Canada already have programs like these. Here in Nova Scotia, we have a registry and consistent standards for short-term rentals and tourist accommodations. So if we can do it for tourists, why not for our residents? And we're also calling to direct more resources to supporting people to find and keep housing through housing support workers or tenant associations. And so these investments in housing have a ripple effect across the community and the economy. When people have safe housing, healthcare costs go down. When people have affordable housing, they can spend their money on other things to support our economy. And when people have secure housing, they stay in our province to live, work, and raise their families. That being said, this budget prioritizes housing not just because it's good for the economy, which it is, but most importantly, housing is a human right. So that's the broad strokes of the housing section.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Um, so Kyle Buitt is with us, but he's joining us from one of those places in Nova Scotia where the internet is a little unstable. And so we've asked him for his presentation for some videos. We're gonna play those now for you. Kyle is in the room and will participate. We should have a bit of time for Q&A as well. But Ruby, will you play those?
Hi folks, my name is Kyle Buitt. I am the co-coordinator of the alternative budget this year, and it has been a long process, but I'm very happy to be here with the final results and to share them with you today. This budget provides a very clear and implementable alternative to our current conservative government in Nova Scotia, and I think that's a great thing. So I'm going to talk about four sections of the budget today: food and agriculture, transportation, insurance, offshore wind. So I'm going to start with food and agriculture, and we start from two contradictory points on this. The first is that farms in Nova Scotia are losing money and have been for some time, and the other is that consumers, people who eat food, are seeing some of the highest prices ever for food. And so this is a bit of a contradiction, and it deserves some exploring. We propose two ways to kind of address these problems. The first is an idea that you've probably heard talked about a little bit already. That is nonprofit grocery stores. CCPA National just did an excellent report on this. I encourage you to go on the website and check that out. And there's lots in that we can learn here in Nova Scotia. So the alternative budget funds the Nova Scotia portion of that process. We have a long history of nonprofit grocery stores of Nova Scotia, of course, especially through the co-op movement. Most of those, unfortunately, are closed now, but it's something that can be recreated. And the second element of our food and agriculture policy I want to mention are community food hubs. This is a way of getting people to come together and perhaps learn food skills that they don't know, things like growing their own food, vegetables and fruit, or learning to cook food in new ways, things that make people more food secure and also that create a place to share food as part of our culture. So the last point I want to mention on food and agriculture is for you to consider just how big of a purchaser the Nova Scotia government is of food. They're probably the largest purchaser of food in the province. When you think about things like hospital food, like school lunch programs, like long-term care food, group homes, prisons, this spending power needs to be used to prioritize local food and supporting local farmers. And currently, we don't use this spending power in any kind of policy objectives. That's a mistake, and it should be corrected. So hopefully the provincial government will look at some of those suggestions. The second piece I'd like to mention is around transportation, and the Nova Scotia Alternative Budget proposes the creation of a new public crown corporation to deal with transportation issues in Nova Scotia. We would do this by assisting existing municipal systems like HRM, CBRM, and the Annapolis Valley, where there are public bus systems, and expanding those systems and making them more affordable through a regular provincial grant. Those fares would then be capped at $2 per fare. And then we would look at expanding public transit options in other municipalities, starting with the Bridgewater area, Amherst, and Pictou County. And we would support local municipalities to create those transit routes. The second element of this is having the Provincial Crown Corporation directly run inter-community bus routes. And this would run with lines beginning from Bridgewater to HRM, Kentville to HRM, and Truro to HRM, and it would integrate into HRM's public transit network. This would start linking up our communities with kind of daily service, more than daily service that people have access to. And this can be done. It's not complicated. In fact, Prince Edward Island has just done this. They've created a province-wide transportation system. You can get on a bus anywhere on the island and for $2 go anywhere else on the island. And Saskatchewan also used to have a provincial bus corporation until it was privatized by the Sask Party in 2017. So transportation is an area that the alternative budget really invests in, and we see opportunities in for new development. The third section I want to mention is insurance. Insurance rates are rising for both your home and your car, and for many people who have been the victims of climate change, whether that is a forest fire that has burned down your home, or a flood that has damaged it, or a wind that has swept it out to sea, you sometimes can't even get home insurance anymore. The industry itself admits that 2024 was the most expensive year on record for payouts, and they expect 2025 to be even more expensive. We'll know as soon as that data becomes available. So our proposal is to create a provincial crown corporation that would manage car, home, and pet insurance in Nova Scotia. Public insurance for vehicles already exists in 4 other provinces: BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec. Each system is quite different, and the model Nova Scotia should adopt actually requires more research beyond the scope of what we wanted to do here in the alternative budget. But this works very well in each of those 4 provinces. Insurance rates are usually kept lower, and that would give people an opportunity to save a little bit of money. Around home insurance, this would be relatively new. No province really does that. But with climate change, it will become a necessity. The private sector is not going to be able to provide affordable insurance rates for property in an unstable climate, and this risk needs to be collectivized. And the alternative budget also suggests that we look at pet insurance as part of the Crown Corporation. It's a growing industry, and it's an area that suffers from a lot of the problems in private for-profit health insurance that we see in the United States. Pets are part of people's families, and this is an opportunity that we can provide people with a little more peace of mind around their family's care. And finally, the Crown Corporation would be self-financing. It would not cost provincial money. There's some money involved to set it up, but it would actually be self-financing after that. And depending on the model we choose, it could actually return some revenue to the province for social spending each year. Finally, I want to say a word about offshore wind. There is currently an offshore wind bid process happening in Nova Scotia, and offshore wind could be the most significant industrial project in Nova Scotia in decades. But it could also end up just being like our natural gas. When I was a kid, natural gas development was a big thing. It was the 90s. They were developing it offshore. In the end, it was given to a couple American companies, and the natural gas was shipped from Nova Scotia to Boston and Massachusetts. And we sold it all at fairly low rates, and Nova Scotians got very little benefit from it. And now the natural gas is gone. So that amount of natural gas could have provided our province with affordable energy for decades. Instead, we sold it at fairly low rates. And the same sort of problems could happen for offshore wind if we're not careful. So currently the provincial government is inviting bids for the development of offshore wind from largely foreign companies, American companies, European companies. It's a flawed process to begin with because one, it's being run by the Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator, formerly the Offshore Petroleum Board, which has largely been criticized for being captured by industry and not paying attention to the needs of citizens. And second, the regulator doesn't actually know the cost of developing the resource. So they're asking companies to tell them the cost, and companies will line this process with profit in every stage of development, which will significantly inflate the cost of developing this resource. And so the alternative budget provides funding for the research and technical requirements to create a public bid for these wind resources. And we would envision this bid be with at least 51% public owned capital and public ownership. It could be divided between the provincial and federal governments, interested municipalities, maybe even some First Nations if they're interested. And such a public bid would seek to also involve as many local, small and medium-sized businesses as possible at every stage of the development, from development, construction, operations, maintenance, and adjacent industries like transportation and parts and more. We need as many local companies as possible involved in this process. So by conducting this public bid, the regulator would actually be able to assess if the bids from American companies are going to be beneficial to Nova Scotians or not. And a public costing would dramatically increase the transparency and accountability of this proposed mega project. So those were my 4 points: food and agriculture, transportation, insurance, and offshore wind. There are lots of parts of the budget that we don't get a chance to talk about, and I really do encourage you to check it all out. So thank you for your interest, and I look forward to any questions I will answer in the chat.
Thanks so much, Ruby. That was great. Thanks, Kyle, for doing that. I hope that you can engage, in fact, in the question and answer. I just want to underline one of the things that Kyle just said, which I think really points to what we're trying to achieve through the alternative budget, and that he said we need to collectivize risk. And that is really what we're underlining. You know, it should not be risky if you want to be an artist in Nova Scotia. It should not be risky if you want to be an early childhood educator in Nova Scotia. You know, if you want to go to university or college, you shouldn't have to risk a huge debt load. Having children should not be a risk. It should not be that kind of calculus, right? This should be a province where people can come here, stay here, and we collectivize what that risk is. People should be supported to reach their potential. Those should not be risks in our society. And to do that, what the original crowdsourcing was actually income taxes and taxes, right? And what we illustrate in showing you who benefited from those tax cuts is actually how much we can do together. So $6 would not mean very much, even the lowest income people. 400 did not mean much to those in the top 20% in Nova Scotia. But when we put that $6 and the 400 and all of that together, we can then fund things that mean we collectivize the risk. Our public healthcare system is probably the best example of that, right? People should not be burdened because they have an illness. We understand that. We have to extend that and ensure that people can indeed thrive in our province. That's the future of Nova Scotia. We are and have, I think, approached 25% of our population is aging, and we need to be age friendly, and we should underline how much People who are aging in our province contribute. We also need young people, and we need young people to stay here, and we need thriving art and culture, and we need childcare that's quality and accessible and affordable across our province. And so that's really the vision of this alternative budget is how do we know what we need to do, and here's the path forward. So